Okay, so I had a friend who said he watched my last video and said that it um, was great in reference to getting a job. Might seem like a weird way to start. I'm learning about myself. I don't think I have any thought that's disconnected from another thought. Um, um, but the reason I wanted to start with that was because I think I try to, when I'm thinking for how to help people, I try to think maybe I don't know how to say this without it sounding like I'm different or potentially sounding any level of prideful, but like I feel like I try to think about problems differently, not in a um, not from necessarily ingenuity or anything like that, but the questions that just start coming up into my head are just very different. I feel like than what I experience in most places. Um, and so today, the primary thing I wanted to talk about was like this idea of uh, responsibility. It's a big category, a big topic, especially as everybody tries to productivity themselves into like their best life ever and have all their systems and all these types of things. Um, I'm realizing that, as things go on, as you get more responsibility in life, there are just certain things you probably won't have time for. And if you did make time for them, you're probably neglecting other things. And then for some of us, like it's just, as I'll explain here and why I have this LinkedIn post pulled up, for some of us, it's just easier to neglect, not easier, but like to deal with the thing that when it's in its most absolute urgent time. It would make sense to take some sort of action earlier, and it's going to sound like you're lazy or whatever, and this probably will be like an ongoing thing I talk about for a while, but anyway, I'll get into it. So this post, this is a good friend of mine, Kirstin. She actually helps me with my and my wife with our finances, and she's great. This post kind of struck a chord with me, and it's something I've been thinking about over the last year or so, more intentionally than I had before. So I'm not really going to read the whole thing, but basically the example here is this client of hers had $250K a year, wasn't saving hardly anything. He's like, we're not big spenders, whatever, but it was just kind of the idea of the thousand little paper cuts, thousand little expenditures that added up to spending most of their income, and they were not saving anything. That's very like myself. I'm a spender. My wife is a saver. If I listened to her more, we would probably be better off. If there's a book, if there's something, I'm just like, whoop, spin. Because there's no, for me, this is a tangent now, but for me, there's no like, I don't feel any sort of way about waiting for something in terms of the financial reward. Like, I'm sure it would be better to wait to purchase a book for XYZ reason. But I'm like, well, I have the money, I see the book, I want the book, why not buy the book? The in that regard, the wait is not necessarily the worth a reward, and it's all the things I can't see along that path that end up biting me in the butt later. So I'm not saying I'm doing the right thing, but it's just I know that about myself. Anyway, she helped him through this process, and now he's saving a good bit of money. Huzzah! It's a great thing. I hope that didn't sound like I diminished the work she does. But what this did for this guy was there was something that they didn't have the time to put and effort to put in, because they had other responsibilities, and finances was just not something that they were putting in time into, which is this very common. And that's kind of the idea I want to talk about, is like, there's so many things in life we feel like we have to do that when we don't do them, we start to, we have some guilt, we have shame about not doing it. And the idea here is that that's why you ask for help, and because admitting you can't do certain things well is not a character flaw. It's not something that's wrong with you. It's saying it's actually healthy to say, I need this level of help. So I want to share one. I reposted her thing, but with a lot of these thoughts. And this kind of comes down to the big idea that I said I've been thinking about for the past year. And it's this idea of being badass at life. Now, I know that in my conversation, my everyday language, I would not use this word. It's who we are. But this comes from a book called Badass Making Users Awesome by Kathy Sierra. And there's a lot to that book. But I've started to look for things in my life that when I ask for help with them, like, what are areas in my life where I feel like I'm failing, probably a small but silly example, but also a profound example, which kind of has set me on this path, was about probably a year ago, a little less than a year ago, I like cutting the grass was just, when we had our first son, we moved into a house, has a decent sized property for Charleston, and North Charleston, in case anybody reading this is like, oh, he's got to do some property in Charleston. A decent sized property in North Charleston area. And over the course of the past couple of years, I've realized that as the grass would grow, and I would not cut it until it was too long, and then it was a whole ordeal. But it was just another thing to do. And for so much of my life, especially in the area of the States where I live, in the Bible Belt, and all these things, there's all these ideas of like what it means to be a man, like your responsibility. And some of that's probably accurate and true, and most people are not trying to, like, there's no necessarily ill intent in trying to lead you that way, but that's where all this guilt and shame starts to get heaped up, is because you're like, oh no, if my parents come into town and my dad sees my yard, what's he going to think? I'm not being the responsible man I ought to be. Now, most of the time, if you ask these people, they'd be like, oh, hey, in our situation, you got 2 young kids. Like, we know you don't got time. Let us help. Most people are willing to offer help, but societally and culturally, there's just been all these things over the years that it's easy to just start assuming that I'm failing in my responsibilities because you've seen or heard or read whatever it is online about what it means to be responsible. You don't, I don't know the phrase, you don't rise to the level of whatever your goals, but you fall to the level of your systems. And it's like, well, maybe. I think there's a lot more to systems than not. But sometimes it's just, there are just things that are not going to get done. And if you systematize everything, you're probably going to alienate a lot of people in your life. Now, somebody's probably going to argue, I mean, not to this video because I have no followers, but somebody's probably going to argue that, well, it's more important to have systems than, and if that alienates people, then, whatever. Yeah, but sometimes those people are your family, your spouse. Like, if I had systems for everything, it would be the absolute most stressful thing. Not just for me, because that is true, but for my wife, for the kids. Be like, oh, not now, kids. The grass has to be cut, or not, whatever it is. So anyway, that's where this whole idea of kind of, I said community makes us, I'm just going to say, better at life from this point forward. Because there are people who do the thing better than I can, and they spend their time doing that thing. So the guy, I don't even know if I actually finished sharing, but a little less than a year ago, I said I was really having trouble with cutting the grass, and finally I asked a close friend if his son, who I knew cuts grass, could come cut it, and his son couldn't, but they had a good friend who could, and then he started coming every 2 weeks, and I have never felt more liberated and somewhat, I don't want to say powerful, but I would use this word here, badass. Again, I just don't like saying the word that often, but it makes my point. I have never felt more liberated, I guess, more free from what I say a lot down here is this idea of expending that cognitive resource. Be like, oh, it's just another thing I have to do. Instead, I can come home and be like, it's done. He did it. Thank you for doing that for me. And I would pay, you tip them huge, because you're like, this was the freedom I needed from this thing. And so for Kirstin, she's doing the same thing with finances for my wife and I. Sometimes you get stuck in a hole because you're like, you think I ought to do this, but if I ask for help, it's kind of admitting a problem, so I'm not going to ask for help, and then you're just going in this cycle. And the way to break free from that cycle is to ask the person who does it. And yeah, some things cost, but like the mental freedom and mental emotional freedom, lower stress, all the things that come from asking for help from people who do this, that like this is their thing. Oh, it's just so nice. So that's kind of all I wanted to talk about. And this was just, there are people out there who are eager to help. You probably have friends who are eager to help. And if there are things in your life that you are not able to get done, that feel like a responsibility, that are heaping shame and guilt over you, just ask for help. That's all there is to it. The next video I think I want to talk about is this kind of a little bit extended version or a more honed in discussion. I'm not talking with anyone, but rant maybe about cognitive resources and AI. So anyway, yeah, thank you.